The agenda this week considered the creation of Ontario's Greenbelt, measured the merit of modern marriage, and put a price on a wintry tradition. The agenda's week in review begins with breaking the gridlock in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Where you stand on this issue often depends on where you sit, and you have a different hat on right now. If you were part of a government that was trying to balance a $12.5 billion budget deficit, you might be saying to you three, we just don't have the kind of money for this that you want us to have. So when they say that to you, which is invariably what they'll say to you, what do you punch back with?
They actually don't come back and punch at us at all, because what we're suggesting is that we're going to work together, and that we're going to take those scarce dollars and we're going to make them work, and we're not looking in silos, we're not looking at individual communities, we're thinking regionally, and we're thinking about what the benefits are to the province of Ontario. It's a good business case, it makes sense, and it's hard to argue with. And in fact, we had a meeting with Minister Duguid just yesterday, and the meeting was over in a half an hour because he agreed with us. So we're asking. He hasn't
talked to the Minister of Finance yet.
Not
that's
yet,
why.
But I feel confident that we've made such a good business case that we're pushing to have this included in the budget.
This sounds lovely, but I wonder. I know mayors want to work together to get stuff done. I get that. That's the new spirit in the province. But there's another school of thought which says you guys are all in competition with each other as well. And if you get what you want, maybe he doesn't get what he wants, and maybe she doesn't get what she wants. Is it a zero-sum game?
Well, that's been the reality up until now. I mean, if we think of the Metrolinx funding, that the first tranche of funding was $12 billion. $12 billion, most of it went to Toronto and GTA because of need. And I think we all understood at the time that Union Station had to be expanded to be able to accommodate the big flow. Toronto and Union Station is where everything gravitates towards ultimately. So that requires, I think, significant attention. I think everyone that was on the Metrolinx board when we formulated the big plan move understood that. So it's we've stepped back and said, yes, we understand that Toronto needs that investment. They need to electrify. They need to have more capacity. Now the second tranche of funding is in place, and I, as one mayor would say, having been part of that, well, we held off on that round. Now we should be, as we agreed to, the first in line for whatever comes up next, or the second, or the third, or whatever it may be. I don't think we're competing against one another. We're just advocating for our municipalities.
I get it, but you don't mind if I stir the pot a little bit here. Sure. For example, your taxpayers in Waterloo Region have already put more than $200 million into your local transit plan, right? Mm-hmm. So now I'm hearing Mississauga wants their LRT and they want the province to pay for the whole thing. I bet you and Hamilton want the province to pay for the whole thing. Yep. Brampton, we're not sure where they're,
No, Brampton's prepared to put some skin in the game.
They are? Okay. Yep. So I'm wondering again from you, how ticked off are you going to be if you find out that some of these other municipalities got their systems paid for 100% by the provincial government, whereas your taxpayers had to kick in?
You know what, at the end of the day, I think we need to look at how do we build a province that's strong economically and that allows all of our cities to move forward in a positive way.
Okay, but what does that mean, really?
Well, but you know what, we're in an increasingly global world where competition is a big player, and the reality is, this part of Ontario is competing, as an example, against the corridor between San Jose and San Francisco. And so very much of the ask that we're working on around two-way all-day go is built around the notion of how do we take that corridor from Toronto to Waterloo Region, compare it to San Francisco to San Jose, look at the number of jobs that exist there, look at the economic benefits, and we built a whole business case around it to justify
I hear what you're saying.
Going forward.
I hear what you're saying, but your previous council took the political risk of raising taxes on property taxpayers in order to help fund this transit plan that you're putting forward.
Absolutely.
Other municipalities may not be inclined to do so. Aren't you going to be upset if they don't have to make the same political risk in order to get their project funded at the end of the day?
Well, I think at the end of the day, Steve, this is the first phase of a two-phase of LRT, and obviously if the rules of the game change going forward, then we'll have those discussions when they happen. We're certainly just happy that both the feds and the province recognize the importance of this investment for our area going forward, and we believe in the long run it's going to more than pay back to our region and to the residents of our region from a quality of life perspective.
If you're injured and there is responsibility placed on more than one defendant, in the normal course, the court will, if they can, apportion liability. One party may be 25% liable, another party may be 75% liable. What my friends are talking about is that in the cases of a municipality, if there's a multi-million-dollar decision, let's talk about it in the context of a roads case, you've got a negligent driver who's carrying $1 million of third-party bodily injury limits. The municipality gets held accountable for 1%. The negligent driver's on for the other 99. If you've got a $2 or $3, $4 million judgment, the municipality is going to be responsible for paying the entire judgment, and it's up to the municipality to try to collect the other proportionate share.
But tell me this, is there a difference between two people getting into a car accident, one insurance company is going to sue another private insurance company to work things out, versus going after a municipality where if it's a significant judgment, people's taxes are going to go up in order to have to cover that? That's different, isn't it?
It's not, first of all, it's not insurance companies suing insurance company. It's one person suing another person. The insurance companies respond.
Right.
And I appreciate that there's the notion that, you know, there's these big judgments out there and that the liability, that the municipalities are going to be responsible for paying it. But the reality is that's what the insurance is for. We buy insurance, we all carry insurance to protect ourselves in the event that we've done something wrong. There's no reason why the municipalities shouldn't be under the same.
To the proportion that they're liable. I completely agree with that. But and Patrick cited the fact that there's not a lot of judgments. He cited 2 tobogganing judgments. Well, one of the reasons there's not a lot of judgments out there is because municipalities live in fear of the 1% rule. If you're in for 1%, you're generally in for a lot more than 1%.
And realistically, looking at you know, as stated earlier, developing a decent public policy to deal with the issue.
So what does that look like?
Well, for us, it's, I mean, look at the Saskatchewan model, or what actually AMO brought to the government table a year ago. That I thought it was more of half a loaf than the whole loaf, and it's basically the difference between the 1% is that municipalities are not saying that they shouldn't be at the table. We're there, and when it's apportioned. The shares, obviously we shouldn't be the default insurer for negligent individuals, whether it's an impaired driver with not the proper insurance, those particular issues. We shouldn't be the individuals now to pick up that whole tab.
But is it your view that if a municipality has signs posted clearly stating that you toboggan at your own risk, and that if somebody gets in trouble and hurts themselves, you ought not to be allowed to be sued? Is that your position?
Well, I think there should be some responsibility for the individual who has just avoided reading the signs and so forth. Are they going to be 100% held responsible? I'm not a lawyer in particular, but the bottom line is that we should not be held accountable for someone's negligence to the point where we have to pay 99% or 100% of a claim.
There's got to be some personal responsibility.
There has to be some personal responsibility for the individual who, upon itself, took the risk, reading the signs, knew the consequences, and then more or less shrugs his shoulder, and the municipality is going to be fully responsible.
But that is one of the safeguards that's built into our tort system.
The 1%?
No, the personal responsibility.
Let me share with our viewers what you folks already know. Sheldon, shall we bring these up here? Here are some numbers on marriages and divorces in Canada. The marriages at the top line, the blue line, and as you can see, as Sue-Ann just referred to it, that number is starting to decline. Fewer among us are getting married, but similarly, fewer among us are divorcing. Let's go to the next graph. What are the odds that you're going to get a divorce? Well, apparently, we are sort of flatlined right now. It's about 40% in Canada, which is down from, you saw that peak in the mid to late 1980s. So we're pretty steady as she goes, 40% right now. Here's the next chart, which I think is really interesting. When do people divorce? When are you most vulnerable to getting a divorce? And it seems that if you can get past year 4, your odds are better, right? Very few people, as the chart indicates in the bottom left-hand corner, get divorced within the first year. Some, but very few. But then there's something about year 4. There's a real spike there. But if you can get past there, you're sort of not doing badly as you get into older age.
It's also around the time where you've had your first child. Exactly. So you've got a year or two together. and then you have that first baby, and that first year is hard. It's also when you've got a significant, for most families, a significant drop in family income because somebody's on maternity or parental leave, or in Quebec, paternity leave. And it's also when you're sleep deprived, and it's also when you're trying to accelerate your career and you're just building your momentum in your career. So that's when you're likely to work the longest hours.
This is all year 4, roughly.
So it's always in that sort of band. If you get over that, then you're into rhythm, your children are in childcare, you have the second child, you've been through this once before, and then you sort of slide down, less likely as the kids grow. But I don't think we can underestimate the significant stress that families have from a financial perspective, which is the primary reason why marriages tend to fall apart in the first place.
So
I want to throw in something else, which is the evolutionary psychology stuff. That 4-year mark proves to me that an American anthropologist named Helen Fisher was right. Because what Helen Fisher found in looking at societies all over the world is relationships or marriages tend to break up at the 4-year mark. And what she posits is, we also know that that wild, passionate, romantic love that some people feel has a shelf life, like yogurt. And at the 4-year mark, it's over. Now you have a choice at that stage. It's not the only kind of love that exists. And if you have the patience, and this is a person you value in other ways, you can continue and wait for some of the romantic feeling, not that first rush, but some of it to come back, and recognize that you're not going to be ecstatically happy all the time. But in this consumer society, many people think they're entitled to be ecstatically happy all the time, so they move on looking for a better product, one that fits their needs more completely than the person they chose the first time.
And repeat the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely, over and over again.
Ronald.
It's exactly what I was going to cite, is the research that shows that, in fact, this kind of passionate romantic love has a shelf life, exactly the expression that I use. And of course, if you go into marriage with the idea that this is what it's all about, then it's bound to be sadly disappointing. And of course, there's another, in other words, a kind of crucial feature of that phase of romantic love, which some people call limerence. I kind of like that word because it's a special word for that very specific kind of intense, romantic, obsessive love. That one of the features of limerence is the absolute certainty that it will never change. And it's so deeply clear. I mean, if there were a God, it would show how cruel and vicious that God is, that he has instilled in us this absolute certainty that something which he has also made not to last will last. It's a cruel joke. And if you could just,
Actually,
one of the things that I think that a training in relationships would do at an early age is to try and make people understand these two extremely rebarbative truths. That on the one hand, you're going to think it's going to last forever. And on the other hand, you can be absolutely sure that that won't last forever.
I just want to break in with something really short here.
Sue Ann, you first, and then Peter.
Of course, but it's important. You're absolutely right, except have you ever tried arguing with someone who's in love? You know, this is not the person you think it is. You need to take time. It is one of the times in people's lives when they are completely irrational and they think that you see less than they do, not more, because of course you are not capable of the depths of love which they are experiencing. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Peter Stockland, come on in.
I would say that there is a God, and in fact, his benevolence is manifested in the fact that he gives us lives where we age and we actually are given the opportunity to grow in prudence and wisdom. We're actually able to mature, and we're actually able to see that the things that were so meaningful to us when we were 19 are bupkas by the time we're 39. I once heard a guy, a marriage counselor, he identified 129 points of incompatibility within any married couple. But by the time people actually get well into their marriage, they recognize that about 127 of them, whether it's dust bunnies under the bed or socks left on the floor or more serious things, are all things that we grow in wisdom and learn to accept of the other person or help them understand the way to get around it. There's a huge benevolence to the order of nature that allows us to progress in our lives along those lines.
So essentially, the command that you want people to obey when they get married is to do the best of a bad job because you're going to be miserable, but that's what life is all about. Maturing means getting used to the fact that you're going to be miserable. I don't think that that's particularly attractive as an ideal, and I really don't see why that should be the ideal.
Peter?
There's a difference between a command and a vow.
A vow is even worse, because when you make a vow, you're promising something. And when you promise to love somebody forever in the same way as you love them now, you're making a promise which is absolutely impossible to keep.
You can't love them in the same way that you loved them when you got married, but you can love them in a different way, is what I'm hearing.
You don't have to be miserable.
I think we're confusing the love and lust is the issue, because what we're really saying is don't just marry someone for hot sex, is what it's really sounding like we're dancing around.
We have some sense about what the long-range game for Russia is here. We certainly know they want a Ukraine that is not part of NATO. They want a neutral Ukraine, and they'd certainly like a federated eastern part of Ukraine as part of Russia's sphere of influence. I mean, that's right, isn't it?
Oh, that is absolutely right. And I think actually, as sad as it is, Putin is probably going to get it, because Petro Poroshenko needs to build his country, even if there are pieces of it is bitten out by Russia, if not necessarily officially, except for Crimea. I think that Martha is right, and this conflict would probably be even going further into Ukrainian territory. I think Mariupol, another very important port, would probably be then the next flare of, before the next ceasefire happens, the next flare of Putin's influence. So this is indeed the case, but I don't really know whether it can be solved other than having international community try to negotiate with Putin, as horrible as the solution may be for Ukraine and for the international community, because war in Europe is a worse possibility, worse scenario than that.
In which case, Nina, what do you, since we understand what Russia's long game is here, what do you see as Ukraine's long game?
Well, it seems to me, I mean, I think Martha put it very well, is that, you know, Poroshenko needs to start building the country. He needs peace, he needs stability, and he is really not a war president. I mean, Putin is much more of a warmonger president, not Poroshenko. Poroshenko is a brilliant businessman, and I think that's how Ukraine would benefit, is that he can make it work the way he made work his businesses. So he desperately needs this peace, as bad as this peace is, and in some ways it seems to me that he's almost accepting the Putin terms as long as he can move on with this business development, economic development of his country, which of course the West, the United States, Canada, Europe should absolutely 150% be helpful of.
Well, that is the big question. I noticed the new foreign minister for Canada said today there are more sanctions coming. He didn't specify today, but he said there are more sanctions coming. But, I mean, is the reality here at some point, Marta, that Ukraine is going to have to accept the way it is? As much as you may not like it, but that's the reality.
Well, here's the historian in me coming out. And that proposal has been put on the table in regards to Crimea, in regards to eastern Ukraine, and that certainly is a possibility. But let's remember what happened in 1938. When there was another leader of another country who was aggressively pursuing territory in a neighboring state, presenting various arguments of protecting nationals of a similar nation, and Western democratic leaders met in Munich and said, well, if we let him take that territory, maybe he'll stop. And of course, a year later, it went on.
The world was at war.
So
it's always hard. You know,
I mean, history
it's
doesn't
dangerous.
always repeat itself.
I was just going to say, Marty, you got to be careful when you play the Hitler card, right?
It's very difficult to know, how do you stop someone who is clearly pursuing an aggressive agenda? I mean, it's like a bully in a playground. There are different ways to try to stop aggressive behavior. And usually what happens in the playground is the teacher comes out and says, okay, stop the fighting, separate the warring factions, make sure the aggression is contained, the smaller person is okay, and then some sort of settlement is reached. The international arena is not a playground, and there's no teacher to come and separate the warring parties. So, I mean, the equivalent is, you know, the bully has beaten up somebody, so, well, okay, we'll just let that happen and hope that it stops there.
Well, again, okay, Nina, let me ask you about the teacher in this case, who if I'm going to extend the metaphor here, is the United States, because there are certainly elements in the United States who would like to see much more lethal weaponry delivered to Ukraine in order to help it push back against Russian aggression. How does any of what's transpired over the last 5 days, do you think, affect those efforts to make those weapons deliveries?
Well, it has, I'm sure it will affect. I mean, the conversation died down for a bit just because there was an idea that diplomacy should be given a chance, and now I'm sure the conversation will flare up again, will start all over again. I think it's a big mistake because Putin doesn't back down. He's not going to back down. He actually would rather take his country with him, down with him, than to stop. And making him do that probably is not necessarily a good idea. I don't want to play the Hitler card. I think it's there's a different political circumstances with different countries that we're talking about. And so Putin does have certain international appetites close to his heart, which is New Russia, the Novorossiya. But I would see these parts that are being taken by the rebels right now closer to the Transnistria in Moldova development rather than the Hitler expansion of Europe. Transnistria in Moldova is a Russian-controlled territory. I would see it this way rather than thinking that it's going to be the new war in Europe and the world needs to step in immediately to stop it, because I think the lethal delivery of weapons would probably be the beginning of war rather than the end of it.
Just to bring everybody up to scratch, can we bring this map up, please, Shelton, and we'll tell everybody a bit of the brief history, a decade long actually, of the Greenbelt, which was created 10 years ago this month, February 2005, by the McGuinty government. It protects 1.8 million acres around Ontario from development. It includes areas that had been protected by previous provincial governments, such as the Niagara Escarpment and the Oak Ridges Moraine, and there you see it, all the way in the Greater Golden Horseshoe up to Tobermory. I want to talk to you first off about housing prices, because many people will argue that it stands to reason that people in the Greater Toronto Area are paying way too much for housing, in part because this valuable land has been taken off the market. What's your view of that argument?
Well, I think that argument would be true if everywhere across the Greater Toronto Hamilton area houses were expensive. But in fact, we know they're not. We know that, well, house prices vary. If you go out to Oshawa, you know a price for an average size house, the average home price is between $250,000 and $275,000. If you go into downtown Toronto, right in the core of the city, it's about $1.4 million. The Toronto city average is about $800,000.
Isn't that unbelievable?
So it is unbelievable.
You shake your head
just
at those
like
numbers?
huge numbers.
Yeah.
So if the price was the same everywhere, I think that would be true. It would also be true if the land was built out. But we know we still have a significant amount of land where over 800,000 single-family homes have been approved, but they're not yet built. So why are those houses not built if there's a market to build them? So I think the argument would hold if, in fact, there was no more land left to build, but there's still a significant amount of land within the buildable area that is available to build on.
Do you think that argument's a tough sell? And I only ask that because I saw the piece you did in the Globe and Mail. You did an op-ed piece, and there were, a good number of comments below there where people were saying, what do you, we're not buying. If you take this much land off the market, it stands to reason that what's left is going to be more expensive. Tough sell, this argument?
Well, I think if you take a very simple kind of supply and demand lens to this argument, I think that would in fact make sense. But housing doesn't actually work like that, in part because there are locational factors that determine where people choose to live. So one of the challenges that we have is that the prices are very high and are raising very quickly where we have our best transit investments and where we have most of our mixed-use communities where there's a lot of amenities within walking distance. So really the demand that's driving up housing prices
isn't on those edges where the Greenbelt is. The demand that's driving up housing prices is along our main transit corridors and walkable neighborhoods. So you can look at the market. The market actually tells the story because it's those main corridors where the prices are the highest. It's also important to note that between 1999 and 2001, the urban footprint of the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area grew by about 24% to add 1 million people. So that's between 1999 and 2001. Now, if we look at the data from 2001 to 2010, we see a very different story. What happens is the same amount of people, about 1 million people, are accommodated, but the urban footprint only grows by 7%, not 24%, so 7%.
More intensification.
More intensification. So what's happening is the demand is growing, not on the edges, because that land exists. There's 30 years worth of development on the edges that we might not even need because there's so much demand for housing within walkable areas, in areas where there's transit.
So what's your view of how well the Greenbelt is working?
Well, I can give you my view, and it's not a terrible view. I mean, the Holland Marsh is a specialty crop area within the Greenbelt. We don't have the same pressures that maybe some farmers would have in other places in the Greenbelt.
Pressures in what respect?
Well, development pressures. Okay. We're in a floodplain, so we're not, unless something drastically changed somewhere and we run out of land altogether to develop, then we don't face those same growth
pressures.
We have the traffic pressures because of the development around us. So I would say this is where I'm going to kind of steer away from what I thought I was going to say originally, is it depends who you talk to within the Greenbelt, whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. Because every farmer, there's so many different sectors in agriculture, and they all have different needs. And so their experiences within the Greenbelt would be different than perhaps mine are. But what I would say is I think the Greenbelt was a tremendous idea, bringing it forward. I think the last 10 years we've been on a learning curve. We've been learning what doesn't work and what is working. I think it was last fall, York Region, it undertook a workshop with various with the 9 municipalities within York Region and various environmental groups within York Region. And what they were doing is they wanted to see what had worked with the Greenbelt, where we could make improvements.
And when you say what's working, what does that mean?
Well, I just think is it following the Greenbelt? Is the Greenbelt actually performing the way it was intended to be performing?
As in saving farmland?
As in saving farmland. The environmental component, which is, to me it's one and the same. Being a farmer, I'm a steward of the land. And some people might not really see it that way, but we are. Farmers are stewards of the land. We're the first stewards of the land. I mean, if we don't look after the land, it's certainly not going to look after us.
You're out of business.
We're out of business.
Yeah. So what's not working?
Well, see, I think what we need to have is a really moving forward, and we are coming up for a review with the Greenbelt plan this year, although it seems to be a huge mystery when that's going to be occurring. I sit on a number of boards, and we're starting to put feelers out and say, okay, this is something we need to start thinking about. We need to start putting our ducks in a row and decide, okay, what can we improve? We have the Greenbelt. There's talk of it. It has expanded in Niagara, I think, that last year, and there's more talk of it going to be expanding some more. Why don't we sit down and have a really great discussion with those people who are going to be impacted? And I think, and I could be wrong here because I wasn't part of the original process. That was pre-elected official days. But I think now we need to really be cognizant of the people that are going to be potentially impacted.
Impacted how? Impacted
by land values. If they're not going to be able to sell their property for retirement purposes, is there going to be some kind of compensation down the road for them having been stuck? It's not their choice to be in the Greenbelt. That's where their farm is. Perhaps that's where their farm has been for the last 3 or 4 generations. But are they going to pick up and go? I don't think so. Some have. Realistically, are more going to? No. So I think we have to sit down and have discussions with not just large farm operators, but mid-size and smaller farm operators as well. Sit down with the powers that be and say, okay, you know what? This is not going to work. This could work. maybe we're going to have to reach a compromise somewhere along the line.
But just so everyone understands, if you've got a working farm right now and you're in your whatever 60s, 70s, and you decided you've had enough and you want to sell, but nobody wants to buy the farm and take the farm,
yep.
You're out of luck?
You're out of luck. I mean, and there's probably some use for it, but it's not the same as if it wasn't within the Greenbelt, where you could sell to a developer and make, you know, tens of millions of dollars.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.